You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 334th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 1035th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of May 16th, 2024. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this show how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
All right, well, as it pertains to this year's team, the only news was the commitment of Langdon Hatton, who we're going to spend a decent chunk of time talking about later in the show. But if you think about, former Hoosiers, the big news this week was both some comments and the performance from Khalil Ware at the NBA scouting combine. I talked with Andy Katz and had some really positive comments about Mike Woodson and the staff's impact on his development. Said they were really able to push him, but also allowed him to play through mistakes. And Katz kind of asked, how did he do, or did it work out how you wanted? And he goes, well, you can see where I'm at now. So I guess he did a good job. So I think from a developmental standpoint, I think that was always one of the most positive stories from last season was being able to really get some of the great potential out of Ware during his performance on the season. And you certainly can't help but think that'll help with recruiting future big men. And if you look at just some of his testing numbers, Nick Kalinowski tweeted this out. He's a draft analyst. Said we have a new all-time combine score record holder. Indiana big man Khalil Ware has finished with the highest score of any center in the database, earning a perfect score of 100, breaking the previous record set by Damian Jones. And that score is essentially just a composite testing score of the different things that they have guys go through, but certainly something that we saw from Ware and his athleticism for a guy his size. And he displayed that in the combine. So that's certainly good news for him as he looks to figure out where he's going to go in the upcoming NBA draft. So big news for him. Excited to see Khalil continue to develop in the NBA and has some really positive comments about the staff, which is always good for future recruits as we go. So good week all around for him at the combine. All right, now let me introduce my co-host for this week. Jared, Ryan, and Coach all have conflicts tonight, but have no fear. We have the perfect replacement here to help us break down Indiana's newest commitment. He's coached youth basketball for 24 years in the Columbus, Indiana area, and most recently in the Columbus Revolution program. And he's one of the hosts of X's and Joe's, a podcast on the Back Home Network that analyzes roster building and coaching at a deeper level. Just had a great episode out this week with our own Tony Adranya, and it is the coach, Bob Moats. Bob, I do not have theme music for you, but I don't believe that's just because I don't have it. I don't believe it truly exists yet. So, in the long off season, maybe something that Bob Thompson can work on. But as it is, we'll have to, people can just, shoot out suggestions, whatever they want for what that might be. But Bob, what's on your mind this week?
Yeah, usually it's the Benny Hill theme, and people are running around in the background. So that's kind of where that theme music kind of goes in my head. What's on my mind? Khalil Ware, incredible, just an incredible showing at the combine, and we'll talk more about him a little bit here. But I just was pleased to hear that. But really, Langdon Hatton coming on, sounds like we have a roster for next year. We're not even Memorial Day yet, and I believe that in the transfer portal era, having everything kind of locked into place, having kids ready to come on basically June 1st and start getting together, getting acclimated to campus, getting acclimated to each other. It's going to be a key indicator for success for this program moving down the road for this season. And I'm really excited about what's coming in, and just a lot of good stuff buzz-wise for this program, not just with the recruiting haul and the portal haul, but also, you have the basketball tournament team gearing up, Ware at the combine, Trace Jackson Davis with a great rookie season. A lot of positivity coming through the Indiana University program right now, and it's a good sign, and hopefully a good sign of things to come.
Absolutely. All right. Well, in store this week, we've got a couple of Hoosier headlines, which we've touched on briefly already. Then in segment 2, we'll get into a bit more of a Langdon Hatton scouting report as he committed earlier this week. And then we've got some mailbag questions, a number of which kind of center around that signing. So we'll talk about that all this week on the on Assembly Call Radio. And now let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
This edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, is presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you'll find anywhere. And it's not just IU. Home Field has unique, interesting designs printed on the softest, most comfortable fabrics for over 150 colleges and universities. And now it's not even just colleges and universities. Home Field has been rolling out some pieces for their Indy 500 collection, which Galen has raved about. So it's just as good as you would expect it to be. Tomorrow on Friday, they're rolling out a series of baseball and softball pullovers that they have, as well as some hats. So lots of good stuff there that I know people will want to pick up. And no matter what you buy, you know it'll be comfortable and the colors will last through many washings. And you're supporting an Indiana-based company that came up through the Kelley School of Business. And what could be better than that? Another suggestion I will throw out for you that I've done with our neighbors the last couple of years is they've had some boys graduate high school, have picked a shirt from where they're going to college and given that as a graduation gift. So always a good option. And Home Field has so many schools now that somewhat unlikely that the recipient of said gift is going to a school that they don't have. So hopefully you can find something there. And then, whenever I do that, it was always just a good way to, throw a couple things in the cart for myself and move along. So if you want to do that, you can go to homefieldapparel.com, use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, that website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, Hoosier headlines. First, probably fair to give a warning to people in Indiana. Ryan is actually in Indiana. That's why he's not at the show. He's visiting some friends. I think he posted that he was at dinner at St. Elmo's. So, if you follow him on Twitter, you saw that. So just want to give the people of the great state of Indiana fair warning that he is in town. As far as IU things go, the TBT team assembly ball, they added Devontae Green. I think that happened last Friday. I feel like it was after the show from last week. So far, what we know is it's Devontae Green, Juwan Morgan, Troy Williams, and Miller Kopp. So a good foundation already as they go through that. I'm sure more announcements will be coming in the next few weeks. And then we touched on this a little bit earlier. Khalil Ware at the NBA Combine tested very well. Talked about that composite testing score. It's basically doing all the, running agility. They did vertical leap. All of those things is kind of the combination of the testing is what led to that. Did have that interview with Andy Katz. I think it was Alex from Inside the Hall who talked about it was a little weird. Like Katz was standing and they would kind of like lean over, like they couldn't get him a chair to sit. It was that part of it was awkward, but otherwise a good interview. With Khalil to get a little bit of what he had talked about with IU. And then as you look at mock drafts, as Jared put it in here, as high as 16, as low as 33, but a first round pick in most. So be interested to see as he goes through different workouts and things like that in the upcoming weeks, what he could, where he might go. Certainly think a guy from a athleticism and upside situation, a guy who's going to be intriguing to different teams. And so feels like the kind of guy that somebody a team or two might fall in love with and would expect him to go in the first round, at least based what seems like the consensus is at this point. So, Bob, any of that stand out to you? Anything else on Khalil or TBT?
I'll start with Khalil here a little bit because it's interesting that this program looks like it's going to have 2 straight years where you have a first round draft pick coming out. And even though there are some years where the Big Ten's up and down in the number of first rounder guys that make the NBA draft, I think it's a good show for this program that the perception's there, and we put good NIL packages together with the Indiana brand, as well as looking at guys that are making it to the league, and then you throw Trace Jackson Davis in as a second round pick and having a great year at Golden State. it really is one of those things I think that helps orient the program in the right direction for future recruiting. And especially, again, we go into the portal era where, you're looking at guys that are blowing up maybe their junior, their senior years, coming in a Dalton Connect type situation, those types of circumstances. It's a good place for the program to be at. Eventually, again, we're hoping again, and like in any type of situation, it has to translate onto the court and has to translate into wins. But I think it's at least a good first step, and a lot of credit to the coaching staff and a lot of credit to the young man, to Khalil, for putting the work in. Coming out of Oregon, he's a McDonald's All-American. It could have gone either way, really. Yeah, it didn't have to go into he could have easily not reached that potential that he's reaching right now. But I think he's figured enough out about how to play the game, how to compete at a higher level. Big men are kind of weird, and we're going to talk about this a little later with Langdon. They take a little longer to develop, I think, just because there's so much nuance and there's so much physicality. And you come in as an 18-year-old boy, and you're expected to play a man's game on the college level and a superman's game on the pro level. You got to think with 30 NBA teams, most teams only keep a couple of bigs. Occasionally you'll see 3, but for the most part, there's only 60 spots for guys who are in that 6'10" and plus area in the NBA. And for IU to have 2 of them in the league right now is really kind of a feather in the cap. As for the basketball tournament, I'm just really excited that we're going to have some IU guys playing this summer. I mean, talk about a great event. And again, it's something that during that off season, and again, we'll have the Olympics, and I always love international basketball, but for that period of time when you have the basketball tournament, these guys are out there, just playing their hearts out for a nice payday. But seeing Devontae Green out there again, seeing Troy Williams, Juwan, Miller Kopp, I'm just excited to see who are the next couple 3 coming in, and just seeing what type of team they're putting together. Do we know who's coaching them yet, by the way? Has that come out?
I don't feel like it has, at least not that I can recall having seen. So, yeah, and I'm not sure what the time frame is for that. I'm trying to remember when that usually tips off. It's certainly not going to do anything until after the NBA season is over. So I know it's over the summer. I'm just not totally sure when it starts. So it's like, how long do you have between now and the start of it to get, the rest of the roster, coaching staff, all that stuff. So,
and
not sure.
I think it's usually like a July start for the most part. And so we're talking, we got at least a month or so in these, and I'm sure they're talking to some of their dudes to just see, can we make you available, and guys playing in Europe and the like. But no, that's it. It's really an exciting, and they use the Elam ending, right? That's the one that uses the Elam ending, that where you don't actually end at 0-0-0, but you actually end when at a certain point, and then it's the first team to hit a certain target score.
Yeah. I forget what it is, but it's like stops at a certain point, and then I need to probably look it up again, because I remember watching it the first time, but yeah, I'll look up a quick synopsis here. But yeah, they do use that, but it does get kind of interesting. So
it's just a totally different way of looking at the game. It's kind of like when you get some of those weird rules in the NIT, but this is even a little more different. So just excited.
Yeah,
to see these guys
here we go.
play. Okay.
Yeah, here's what it is. So at the first dead ball with under 4 minutes remaining, the target score becomes the team that's leading +8. And then you get to whoever's that. At least that's what the first result that came up when I Googled it. So we'll go with that.
So if you're down 10 at that dead ball, you have to score 18 before they get 8.
Before they get 8. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
So for those of you scoring at home, that's it. Yeah. It means no overtime, and every game ends with the last with a game-winning shot.
With a basket. Yep,
so,
exactly.
With a basket. So
exactly.
So exciting stuff.
Very good. All right. Well, coming up on Assembly Call Radio, we are going to talk about this week's biggest story, which was the commitment of Langdon Hatton from Bellarmine. Indiana has found its backup big. What skills does he bring to the table, and how is he likely to be used? We'll talk about that next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, welcome to the chat mob, and thanks to Corey. He said the tournament starts around July 17th, and it is the Elam ending. So I did know what it was called. I just did not know when it started, but definitely excited to see how you have a team. I know I was kind of intrigued by it the first year, and like Hull's played with a couple, with a few other guys, but it wasn't quite the same. And I think I kind of lost interest in it over the course of time because it's, you see some of these other schools where it's all these guys that you're so used to having watched play. And it's like, oh, that'd be so cool. How can, IU not get a team together? And I feel like there's been rumblings of it a couple times in the past, but they haven't done it. I know like Remy Abel played really well in it one year for a team. And so, yeah, be exciting to have that come together.
Well, and any time you can kind of just get more basketball just compressed into this media environment, I'm okay with it. And again, these guys play at high levels. I mean, it's a lot of these. They play in Europe. They're playing. They're playing in the G League. Have had some G League experience, and just getting them back together on the floor. Just it's a lot of fun.
Yep, agreed. All right. Well, we will get rolling here and talk some Langdon Hatton.
Hi, this is AJ Moye. What's the only thing better than upsetting Duke in the Sweet 16? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach for the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
And welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Coach Bob Moats, one of the hosts of X's and Joe's, and we are talking about IU's most recent commitment, which comes in the form of Langdon Hatton. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. Originally from Georgetown, Indiana. He's 6'10", 240, started at William & Mary, then transferred to Bellarmine, and in his most recent season averaged 10.5 points and 7.1 rebounds per game. High game came against Kennesaw State, where he scored 27. If you look at him from an efficiency standpoint, I think the rebounding metrics, I guess I'd look at these a little bit through the lens of what you would expect him to do and what IU is going to need him to do. So I think the things that you like are the rebounding percentages on both ends are solid, has a decent block rate. So albeit a different level of competition, but at least, has a solid block right there. Doesn't foul a lot, which is not a huge deal for somebody who's going to play in a backup role, but hasn't picked up a ton of fouls and will at least keep defenses honest by shooting threes. He shot 45 last year, has shot 53 total in his career. But as I said, most of those coming last year. Made 15 of 45 a year ago, so 33%. So, not great, but again, I think enough to keep people honest. If you look at the free throw shooting numbers, 64% in total. So that speaks a little bit to the shooting there. And so, you look at that, kind of a lot of those offensive numbers. But, Bob, what's your immediate reaction to the addition of Hatton?
He's a good pickup. You can't teach a kid to be 6'10". I'll kind of start with he played his high school basketball at North Harrison, which southern part of the state of Indiana, for those of you who aren't really familiar with the nuances of where certain schools are. 3A school, very competitive. The teams he played on were definitely well over 500, almost in that 65 to 75% of their winning their games. And he played in the same sectional as Trey Kaufman-Renn for a couple of those seasons. So, he's gone up against really good competition over the course of his career, especially early on. So the kid knows how to win. And going to William & Mary, when he was there, they really weren't a very successful program. So that impacts things like your BPM, which is something Mike and I talk about all the time on our show, is that box plus minus that we use as kind of a quick jump. So he's negative, but he's continuously improving in his 2 years at Bellarmine. And remember, Bellarmine's a program that started off that was D2 up until just, I think, 3 years ago, maybe. So Bellarmine is now breaking into the Division One, Division One basketball, And so their recruiting profile has always been really, again, solid. They were national championships and Final Four type teams out of D2, and he's in a program that I think is looking at kind of, they're definitely in that upgrade mode. Didn't have a great year last year. He came up from an 8-win Bellarmine team. So you take all that into account when you start looking at certain analytics. The big part of that would be, again, when so last year he was -2 BPM. Now, 0 is an average player in college basketball, but his BPM was the second highest on a team that, again, didn't win a whole lot in the ASUN conference. So you're talking about a low major conference. You're talking about when their one bid team, Florida Gulf Coast, was in that conference. You're looking at usually 15, 16, roughly, Andy, when you're looking at ASUN teams, 15, 16 seeds.
That's a good benchmark, I would say, in general.
So you take that into account, that you're talking about one of the most utilized players, one of the best players on a team at that level, and putting him in as a backup. As Andy mentioned, he is learning to stretch the floor. One interesting thing about his 3-point shooting, there was about a 10-game stretch between Thanksgiving and Christmas where he didn't attempt a 3-point shot. And Bellarmine is interesting because they're a team that doesn't really use a lot of ball screens. They're not really a driving team. They run a lot of I call it chin series. I would say it's a chin series type offense where there's a lot of passing and cutting. It's what you also call Princeton type series of offense, where you have a lot of screening away from the ball, and they'll attack off the bounce. And he has Langston has shown that he can attack off the bounce. But and does pretty well at it, especially kind of backing down a player. Can definitely score. Really good footwork. His jump shot, I would say, is emerging. He hits it at a pretty good clip. I think 30% or so, which again will keep a defense honest. So you really can't sag all the way off of him. But he's also the sort of guy that this isn't going to be a kid who's going to shoot 8 or 9 a game. He will, it's going to be when he's in the game. I think you're going to be seeing him throwing a lot of screens, making passes to reset the offense from the top. But the good news for IU is he's not a sort of player like Peyton Sparks. You knew last year he was going to do his damage from block to block, basically. He's going to spend so much time down there that if he spends any more time there, he'll have residency to vote in that part of the floor. And I don't feel that Hatton's the same way. I feel that he's one that can definitely, through a UCLA screen, pop off, and then somebody's covering a cutter. He'll be open, potentially, again, get it to him, shoot the ball, and maybe do some damage in what we'll probably assume to be some limited action throughout the season.
Yeah, I think you looking at a little bit of the KenPom numbers. It's always hard with, as you said, looking at somebody who's going from such a different level on a team that wasn't successful and trying to do that. And so you look a little bit at the way that KenPom will handle some of the, how do they fare against tier A or tier A and B competition? Well, his numbers dropped off a decent amount as you looked at that. So if you looked at conference only games, which are pretty much none of them are going to fall in that tier A and B group, he shot almost 58% from 2-point range and 35% from 3. You look at that, they played 6 tier A and B games. He was only 39.5% from 2 and didn't, wasn't able to do some of the same things there. I think that's what you would expect. Now he's also being asked to do a lot more in those scenarios against those teams. So it's a little bit hard to gauge. And the reality is that you're at a point that you guys have talked about this over the last couple of weeks. You filled most of the major spots on the roster. You're now trying to round out things and figure out backup bigs and things like that. There's so many people in the portal. You've got to find somebody who's willing to step in and play that role and be able to do some things. And so in that regard, I think feels like a good fit. Be able to give you some minutes, got decent size, can shoot it a little bit. I know Jared put some notes in the run sheet defensively. Last season he guarded 72 possessions that ended in a post-up. Opponents scored 0.883 points per possession on those, which was in the 57th percentile. So not great, not terrible. And so you just got to figure out how his defense is going to translate into Big Ten play, where you're going to see different looks of some teams where he may have to guard different types of players and certainly more talented players in large part than what he would have seen at Bellarmine. So I think some good foundational skills that you need as a backup big, but you're not going in expecting too much from him because or at least you think what you're going to get out of Umar Ballo. And Renew will probably also spend some time at the 5 when Ballo is out of the game. So, in that regard, I think you've got a capable guy who's got a lot of experience who'll be able to step in and be able to contribute a bit on both ends. And I think the rebounding numbers are good. When he's on the floor, they're not going to be asking for him to score a whole bunch, but they will be asking for him to play defense, grab rebounds, set screens, as you said. And so hopefully the rebounding numbers that he was able to put up bode well for what he'd be able to do in that kind of role.
One thing that was interesting about that post figure, taking out the points per possession portion, and you said, 72? Was that the number? I think,
yep.
Over the course of a season.
Yep.
You divide that out with 31 games, and you're looking at 3 or 4 times that he was playing post defense where a guy actually got the ball and took a shot. That's the key, or had a scoring play. I think a turnover would count too in those circumstances. So the reason I throw that out is when you think about a 6'10" guy, even playing in the A-Sun, and they're not really picking on him, is what I'm trying to say. He's the player on the floor they really didn't pick on a whole lot on a team that won 8 games. Watching him, and you watch maybe 10 minutes of the game against Austin Peay, or you watch maybe 15 minutes of the K-State game, you'll notice a lot of times that other guy, that his guy, the one problem we have with the synergy is when they chart a possession, it's like a possession ending. When they look at a possession, it's how the possession ended with him on the floor. So it ends in either a shot or a turnover. So there are plenty of times where defensively, and this is where defensive metrics can be a little screwy, you can be a really good defender, but still points per possession sometimes gets a little wonky because you may be successful in forcing a guy to get rid of the ball 4 times, and then the 5th time they score on you. Well, on the metrics, it looks like they're 1-for-1 against you, but in reality, you force that individual to maybe kick the ball out and then have them restart the offense, and going into that sort of mindset. So I think watching him, he's very physical. That helps. I'm not sure again how that's going to translate to Big Ten bigs, but he held his own against K-State, held his own against BYU, especially underneath. I think the other thing is that I watched him a little bit in ball screen coverage, limited ball screen coverage, or watched him on some spot up situations. Moves his feet decently well. He's better at taking away drives than he is taking away perimeter shots. That's a bit of a concern because this team has been known to give up some perimeter shots from time to time. So
occasionally.
That's been known to happen. So, it's like you kind of see him like in drop coverage. He may not be able to cover the ground he needs to cover in order to challenge a 3-point shooter coming off a ball screen or a handoff. I would say that he rotates well. I would say that he knows when to get back on his man and help. And especially if Carlisle, Rice, Galloway, some of the others on, kind of those perimeter defenders do a good job of communicating, he can definitely, when he's in the game, giving either Ballo or Renew a spell, he can maybe get in there and just at the very least, be able to at least clog things up enough where he's not really hurting you on defense. And there have been some situations in the past where we've had big men at Indiana over the time since I've been aware as a basketball fan that there have been some times where we've had some big guys that just haven't rotated as well as they could have. And I'm going back even to the Knight era on some of that, where you have some of these guys where it's like it takes them a while to figure it out. We'll see how he does with the speed of the game. I think the exhibitions will be interesting for him, especially just to kind of see how he fits and how they're going to try and use him a little bit. And then kind of going into those first couple buy-in games will be an interesting start. But again, it's a good pickup from a standpoint if you're looking at the 12th scholarship you filled. That's the guy, and knowing full well that a lot of guys are going to look at Ballo and Renew sitting there in those positions. A higher level big, top level guys are probably not going to be all that quick to jump. And I have a feeling that Langdon had a chance to, for lack of a better term, there were programs looking at him, I think, as you kind of pay attention to some of the other recruiting buzz. I think there were some programs who wanted to get in on him, and he was very quick to say, I really like Indiana. So that's a plus too.
Yeah, the IU put out a release today. Woodson's comments on him. Langdon's an experienced, versatile big man that will help us with our front court depth. He's a big body that can work in the post, get after the glass, and step out to knock down a shot. He's an Indiana kid that plays the right way. We're excited to bring him home to the Hoosier State. So I think that sums it up relatively well. One thing I asked you before we break, this was backup big was kind of the glaring hole coming into the week of what IU needed. They've now filled that with him and have one scholarship remaining. I think a lot of different ways you could go with that. It seems like most seem to believe they're going to hold on to that, not fill it immediately, which I think makes some sense, gives you some flexibility should somebody become available later in the process that maybe you weren't expecting or things like that. What's your thoughts on the philosophy with what to do with that 13th scholarship? I think, again, we go back to the minutes piece. I'm not really sure what you could offer somebody in a lot of cases to come and do something. So you supportive of that at least seeming thought process at this point to kind of hold on to that for right now and not fill it?
Yeah, 200 playable minutes. At this point, you have 12 spots. That looks pretty solid up and down. You have definitively 5 guys who can kind of play what you would call the 4 and the 5 role, for lack of a better term. That post and that stretch, kind of that stretch position, maybe 6, because I know that Leal has been known to do that from time to time also. So call it 6 with Leal and Galloway occasionally. If you really wanted to go small ball, you could put them into those positions. So getting a 13th, I'm not really sure what you do other than having another practice player, or like the Bazzi kid. I think it was the guy the kid that visited the 2024 kid that visited about a month ago. If you want to take you want to just take a flyer on that kid and see if you can do something with it. Maybe throw a red shirt at him and just see about getting him up to maybe playing division, being able to play Power 5 basketball. That would be a situation where that's where I would see, if you're going to use a 13th scholarship, it's going to be one of those types of situations where it's kind of like Ja'Kai Newton last year, where you knew he wasn't going to play, but you're going to take him because you think that he will be something over the next 2 to 3 seasons. And even in the portal era, knowing, and again, we've talked about this at length on several occasions, but we're not really sure after the COVID year how everything's going to play out. We had 2,000 plus kids in the portal this year. Not all of them are going to find teams, but there's going to be some market regulation at some point with this, and there will always be a place for some guys that might, again, and even get them for a year or two, you can still definitely make some, maybe get something out of that kid, and maybe get a situation, maybe just maybe help you on the practice court at the very least. So that would be, I think, with the 13th, what you'd look for if you're looking at anything, because again, a locker room with a guy that's not playing is not always a happy place.
Yeah, I think you're right. Something developmental, and I think that's where, if there's any, I won't even say downside. If there's a negative to the Hatton signing, he's another guy who's got 1 year of eligibility, so he's here for a year, and gone. Balo's the same way. Don't know what will happen with Malik after this year, but you're going to be back in a position again to need to fill the big man spot in the portal again, in all likelihood. And I think what we talked about at the beginning, though, with the track record that I use starting to develop with Trace, with Khalil Ware, I think that maybe is an easier spot to fill because you've got a pretty compelling story to tell those guys. And that may well just become the norm if that's what you're doing, but you don't necessarily have a developmental guy who's going to be able to play even a backup role in that. So it'll be an area that we'll be sitting around this time next year looking to figure out who's going to take that spot. But again, you're looking at guys, even if you find a developmental guy, maybe there's a situation that they feel is better for their development. So that's where it gets tricky, as you mentioned, with the number of minutes you have and how you really try to figure all that out.
And we have the Moreno kid sitting in Kentucky right now. That recruitment's very active. So there's something that, if you're looking at an angle and you're looking at, if you're Woodson and company and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do you maybe get one of the top freshman bigs to come to Indiana? then you can say, look, we have a wide open spot in our post position. And by the way, look at Trace Jackson Davis where, and let's just make the assumption that they find that Ballo next year is, has a great season, a great productive season, and they start talking about him potentially with a pro career someplace. And you can look at a kid like Marino and be like, okay, I know it keeps you kind of in the game. And then you throw the whole package at a kid like that, and it can maybe help steer him. So there's still a little bit in the freshman recruiting portion that can be useful, especially if you're looking for the right type of kid. But again, there is that problem where, you're looking at the portal and you're looking at what can be sometimes. I mean, it's kind of like you're kind of playing craps. You're not really sure. You may be on a hot streak with bigs, but you can't miss. You really just can't miss a year is what it comes down to. So that would be a thought as I'm kind of thinking about what that means of having two outgoing guys in that spot. That's going to be, there are some options, but you're going to have to really just, make sure you've got the right strategy and getting the right guys in.
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, coming up, we've got a number of mailbag questions, including several of which talk a little bit more about Hatton and what his impact can be. So we'll take a look at those and answer any that we haven't hit. So that's next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. All right. I did appreciate Joel suggesting that I start to coach Bowling Green and still do the Assembly Call in some kind of Doug Gottlieb-esque situation. So I did appreciate that. I don't think that's going to happen. Not close enough to home, but not that's the only reason that it wouldn't happen. Just too far away. But
what about Northern Kentucky? What about Northern? I mean, if they ever come open,
that would be close. That would be close for me. I'm not far from there.
Hop over the bridge, you're good to go. No, I mean,
that would be.
I'd come down and run your video if you want me to. I'll pull the camera for you if you need me.
I'll take all the.
I'm in.
I would need all the help I could get and more. So, for sure. And I will not, even though you and I talked about our shared fandom of the Reds. I don't think that's something we should probably talk about at this point. Coach Marlowe is not in the chat. He's probably somewhere on Twitter calling for David Bell to be fired, if I had to guess. So,
growing chorus there. The good news for me is I have Comcast, and so Bally Sports, because of the bankruptcy, Comcast has basically ended their relationship with them. So I don't get to watch this.
I had a similar situation here. We had a hookup, I guess I'll say, to be able to watch the games because they're not on what we use for things, and that stopped working right before things really went south. So I was kind of initially like, man, this is gonna suck. I'm not gonna be able to watch, and now it's like, well, don't feel bad about that at all. We just move on, and then so
save my time. Watch the basketball tournament in a month and a half.
Exactly. All right, we'll get into these questions. I'll try to not ask ones that I know there were a few of them that were about him. I'll try not to hit too much stuff that we already hit. So I'll try to do my best to read ahead and skip any of those where I need to.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
And welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with the coach, Bob Moats from X's and Joe's. It's now time for our mailbag. Most of these questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, easy for me to say, on Substack, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com. All right, first question is from Ron. Is Hatton a forward or a center? Bob, I think you've done more video watching of him, but I would consider him to be more of a center, I think, based on my understanding of him. And if nothing else, really the role he's expected to play.
He's a big, when I say a big, center, big, post. He's 6'10", I don't see him playing. If I see him and Ballo on the floor at the same time, I'm going to think either something's gone really wrong, or someone smells toast. There's no way around it. So that's kind of he's a big.
Yeah, I would agree. If him and Ballo are playing together, I'm not sure what has happened, but it has not been it has not gone to plan, whatever it is.
I'm logging off all Discords and Substack for a period of time, just so I can avoid it. I'll put it that way.
Yep, exactly. This one is from Tim. I think this must have been sent slightly before Hatton committed, but I think we can still kind of go through it. But so he said less of an issue if Hatton commits, but other than Malik and Ballo, IU has no appreciable size. I can see Ballo and Malik hammering each other during practice. Probably want to keep those two guys away from each other from that regard in practice. IU needs one more big body. IU current walk-ons are all guard types, not much help there. Once upon a time, you could walk into the Hyper, see multiple very talented 6'7" and above basketball players on display. Why not leave one scholarship open, conduct walk-on tryouts, and the best performer gets a scholarship second semester of the following year? Gives walk-ons extra incentive to bust their butts and make the team better. Also, years ago, you could find one or two football players who were excellent high school basketball players. I know Ross Hale is one of those who is related to Coach Tonsoni. Inserting them into practice brings Big Ten physicality, and Ballo and Malik don't kill themselves every day at practice. Coach Sig may not like that idea, however, certainly not. Thoughts on utilizing walk-ons in this manner? So a lot to unpack there, but any thoughts on that notion, kind of what you get there? IU does have a slew of walk-ons already. I think that's one thing that you could use that scholarship for, even kind of without the premise of this question, that you could give it to one of them or something like that. But thoughts on, finding guys either on the football team or at the or somewhere else on campus?
You have most programs, you're looking at 2 or 3 guys that can play a quote post position. And I think, let's go. I'll take the walk-on portion kind of first, because I've always loved seeing a walk-on get that scholarship. We have that 13 scholarship. It's a way to reward. It's a team building. It's a good culture move, I think, for a program that you reward. Kid for 3 years has been paying his own freight, going to that kid could have gone to Indiana Wesleyan or St. Francis Marion in the NAIA ranks and played 4 years. In some cases, you'd be looking at a kid that could even be like a national, a potential all-conference sort of player in the Crossroads League. Could have played maybe even at a UND, a D2, and done very well there. So I like the idea of maybe giving a scholarship to a walk-on. I'm not as concerned about the big development, because I think you've got Calbert Cheney that's over that part of the house. You've got again a coaching staff that they've worked really well with. We talk about Ware and Trace Jackson Davis developing as bigs, Race Thompson developing in those positions. Plus, there is a little bit of logic to kind of letting them kind of work out guys like Luke Goody or Mackenzie Mbako. I'd even throw Bryson Tucker in there, where, okay, let's put you in a position where you're having to guard or trying to, again, go in drills against some of these bigger guys. And sometimes, again, maybe you get the pads out, maybe you get the brooms out, however you kind of do that to kind of get those guys working. But that's kind of I think it's one of those things where I feel like they'll be able to develop them with the 3 that they have, as well as maybe bring in some of the other guys in to kind of help them kind of work with them a little bit also, just because they're going to need to be able to play post defense. And if you can stop Ballo, you can pretty much stop, I think, anybody in the Big Ten. If you can hold your own against him in practice, you can hold your own against most bigs across the country.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you've got some guys who can play the 4, and there were times when Mbaka was playing the 4 toward the end of last year. I thought things looked really well. He certainly has the size to be able to put up a fight against guys that are down there. And as more and more teams are playing small, there's less and less need to be able to have that many guys. So I think, especially with Hatton there, I feel like they're set in that spot. Goody was forced to play that some with Illinois and the way that they played for a good chunk of the season. They used Dane Danger later in the year, but he was kind of MIA during part of the season. They had Coleman Hawkins playing the 5. So then you've got Goody, who's done some of that. You've got Mbaka, who's done some of that. And as you said, I think Tucker, if he fills out a little bit, could be a guy who's in that role. Could fit that role depending upon what the matchup is. So yeah, I think they're in a pretty good spot with that at this point. So don't know that we need to necessarily go that route. Although I could see using the scholarship from one of the walk-ons. I think could be something cool. Those videos always are fun to watch. So no complaints from me if they end up doing that. Next one is from Craig. With Hatton joining, love our 6th through 8th guys off the bench, and that's not including McDonald's All-American Tucker, seniors, Indiana kids that understand the tradition. Each brings an identity to the bench. Galloway is a hustle guy that can generate steals and spark runs with defense. Goody is a shot maker from deep. Hatton is a smart, mature big that gives us valuable minutes in the paint. So how would you rank these general attributes? And he kind of says, hustle guy, shot maker from deep, big guy that plays smart, as which maybe is most important to the way that a bench can impact a game.
All of the above, depending on what you're needing at that given time. I'm dead serious when I say that. I think Trey Galloway is a 6-man. I love Trey's versatility because I believe that he can guard 1 through 4 and can even hold his own, if he gets caught in a situation in the post. I like having a 5th-year guy in that position to come off and be your first guy. Whoever's not really if you get a quick early foul or two with a certain player, having him come in, kind of holding to that 20 to 25 minute a game sort of range. I think the big thing is just having guys who can come in and you don't really lose much when they come in the game, if that makes sense. Where you don't have a drop off in performance, and I think we saw that at times last year where the bench would come in, where we have bench players come in, and it just seemed to throw the whole timing of everything off, and the flow gets kind of messed up. I also wouldn't sleep on Tucker. I also wouldn't sleep on Gabe Cupps. I also wouldn't sleep on Newton or even Leal. I mean, we don't know how this is going to flesh out over the next 4 months. You could see a guy kind of leapfrog into being in that top 8 or that sort of 8 area. So it's going to be very competitive. And I think that's the most, going into the development section, the most important part is you have a bench that's going to push the starters, push your high minutes guys. I don't like using starters, like your high minutes, your 30-minute guys to be better. And then come in for them and be able to get defensive stops, make the right play on offense. At times can come in and, if it's their night and their time to score maybe 10, 12, 14 points, get a couple assists and be, and get one of the game balls or one of the hustle awards. But I do think that the Galloway role is going to be integral to this team, because I think that it's going to be somebody who's going to kind of help connect everybody from a glue standpoint, and knows the culture, is a big part of the culture, and can really just kind of be the spark plug at times when this team needs that additional jolt. And just having him come in with that high energy will make a huge difference.
Yeah, of the attributes that he listed there, the two that stood out a little bit more, hustle plays and making big shots. To me, when a bench is playing well, they're keeping the crowd in the game, because the crowd wants to root for those guys because they know they're not going to get as many minutes, and they get in there and do that. Like, they want to see them make plays. We've seen that from IU so many times over the course of time, of guys that come in as 6 men and make big plays and get everybody excited. And so I think 3-point shots and some of those kinds of hustle plays like really feed into that a whole lot more than, kind of fundamental play in the post, which was essentially the third option. So I tend to feel like the hustle piece with Galloway, but I think just because of what else he's going to bring to the table. And I think, he was down the stretch of some of those games last year just absolutely exhausted. And I think if you're allowing him to play the way that he's most comfortable playing and kind of all out, crazy man type stuff that they talk about with him in potentially shorter spurts and not really burn him out by the end of the game, I think that's really intriguing. It's certainly a good he can step in and make shots, but I would kind of lean toward the Galloway portion of that question. And so, that's what I would look forward to. But I agree with you. I think the competitiveness in practices and things like that will be at a different level than it was before. Now, I don't think anybody. I'm certainly not going to advocate for the all bench lineup, no matter how improved the bench feels like it is. But I do think you're going to see some of that feeling out process early in the season and the exhibitions and some of the bye games, different things like that, where you're trying to figure out who fits well together. But I think you've got a lot of pieces that you can try to mix and match to figure out in given situations and games what might work best. And so I think if they get to that point, as opposed to the 5 in and eventually 5 out, I know it's not all at once, but kind of gradual working your way up to that, I think that would be I think that's kind of what you want to look for.
It's almost like a 3 or 4 possession speed bump, and it usually is. And I think the all 5 sometimes gets a little confusing, because you're right. It's not like it's a hockey line change. It's not like we're running the Grinnell system where you just throw 5 guys. They're also waiting at the bench ready to go in. But it always feels like when the 5 go in, it's almost like the team kind of hits a speed bump and has to hit a hard reset sometime in the first half. I'd love to see, if we see an all 5 sub lineup, I'd love to see it instead of at the 12-minute mark of the first half. I'd love to see it at the 8-minute mark of the second half with a 20-25 point lead. That to me would be the best time to play those early in the season for those first 10 games, knowing and letting that time kind of feel it out, because I think that at the same time, the opponent's going to still keep their starters out there just because they're trying to figure some things out and using that game to their advantage in that way. So I think that we're going to hopefully we'll see some differences in that going into the beginning of the season. On my I guess Memorial Day wish list, that's at the top of it.
Yeah, that kind of leads well into this next question from Peter. What are 2 or 3 unexpected 5-man lineups we could see Woody try in the non-conference part of the schedule? Obvious ones being the projected lineup or Trey coming in for Malik and Mbako sliding to the 4. For me, I'd be intrigued by something like Rice, Carlisle, Gallo, Goody, and Malik. Solid perimeter D to keep pressure off Malik, and I would love to see that lineup run/play 5 out. So I think this was a couple weeks ago, the last time that I was on. We talked through some different lineup combinations that we were potentially intrigued by. So I can rehash mine in a second. But with some of the depth, any groups you're interested to see together?
So you maybe take and again, thinking about Rice, Carlisle, Galloway, I'd like to see Tucker maybe in that fourth spot with a renew. Or if you're playing against certain types of 5-out teams that don't, we saw some of them last year where they didn't really have a post presence. They had 5 guys that could stretch the floor. Throw Mbako at the 5. Why not? And that's kind of my thought. If you wanted to get really interesting in some small ball concepts, and especially early in the season, if you're running into a situation where you have that circumstance, giving some guys some different types of play at different sorts of areas, or Goody in that situation where he could play the 4, if you're not throwing in with Tucker. Maybe, again, like I said, just kind of like playing a centerless offense would be something I would be intrigued by IU maybe trying a couple times, even though you have a lot wrapped up in your post positions. So again, you're looking unconventionally. Be interested to see if they try Goody at the 3 every once in a while with Mbako, with Renew and Balo. Just be interested if they give that a shot and try to, just see if that maybe is something that we see. And that's with Rice and Carlisle, that maybe, where you kind of put him more in the Miller Kopp role that they had a couple years ago with, the race and trace, and then, Goody out there to kind of pull that. Not advocating for it, just saying it's something I'd be interested to see if they try that. Or again, you may put Galloway as one of the other 2 backcourt members. I like to see some lineups. Again, I still want to see where Gabe Cupps is in those first 10 games. I'd like to see some work with him with one of the 2 new guards, maybe with Galloway at the 3, or kind of in that sort of wing spot. Kind of see some of those, but really interested at this point as to just how they're going to finagle the post position and how they're going to divvy up those 40 minutes. Balo at 20 to 20. I mean, I could see him, I think at Arizona, he was playing 24 or so a game. I could see that being similar. And you kind of just looked at, even at UConn this year with Klingon and Solomon Johnson. It's not like you're going to play these guys. You really don't want to play your post 40 minutes is what I'm trying to say. So you don't want to play the same guy 40 minutes. So, whatever they can do to kind of break that up a little bit, spell that out a little bit, and then put some other guys in to just get some more spacing and flow. I'd be interested in seeing it.
Yeah, the few that I threw out when we were there, I think some of these were ones that either you or the question discussed. But one I had was Rice, Carlisle, Galloway, Mbako, and Ballo. I think that would be kind of three creators out there. Mbako playing the 4. That one I was intrigued by. This one has Goody at the 3, which is one of the things you mentioned. So Rice, Carlisle in the backcourt, Goody at the 3, Mbako at the 4, Renew at the 5. So kind of probably one of your better shooting lineups you'd be able to put out there. And then one that I thought was intriguing defensively was Rice, Carlisle, Galloway, Tucker at the 4, and Ballo. So be curious to kind of see what that might look like. Again, we kind of talked about earlier that maybe Tucker in some matchups could slide in at the 4. Certainly athletically, I think that would be fine. It's just a matter of, strength wise, what that looks like. And I think, one thing that meant to mention when we were talking about some of the things that Khalil Ware did from a testing standpoint, I think you can give through, that's a feather in Cliff Marshall's cap to be able to talk to guys about and being able to prepare them for those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I think there's lots of intriguing combinations with the depth that they've managed to put together for sure. So I have one more question before we wrap up. Just get your thoughts on this. I think one of the questions that people have, especially as we've looked at, and I know Mike and I have exchanged a couple messages on this, but just trying to look at track records of teams who have gone portal heavy. And we'll have more and more of that as time goes by, right? Like we won't, the sample size of teams who have pulled in as many guys from the portal as IU has is not super big at this point. I think based on what we're seeing, it's going to become more and more prevalent. But one of the things that I think people have questions about is like, what does that look like from a team chemistry standpoint? How does that come together? How do they, how do these guys really gel? We talk about that's going to be important looking at some of these lineups and things like that. So, and one of the things you guys talked about, I bring this up because you guys talked a little bit about this week about coaching and, more than just teaching X's and O's. It was kind of understanding the personalities and the players and some of those kinds of things. So, put yourself in Mike Woodson's shoes a little bit. What things are you trying to do to try to build that chemistry and get these guys to play better together? And what are maybe some early signs that things are going well or going poorly as you get into different practices and situations like that? Like, what are your kind of early signals that you're looking for to feel like things are going well, or, oh crap, this isn't going as well as I'd hoped it would?
It's so funny sometimes because it's almost like, it's like draft. It's like the NFL draft where every team that drafted about a month ago, they know that they got the right draft for them, even if they didn't. They know that. So I think the honeymoon period is always interesting because it kind of goes through phases. I know, Andy, you've coached before, and so you get everybody together and you kind of unwrap what's going on, and you kind of see how they're playing and how they're gelling early on, and you get a pretty good idea, and you feel like, okay, this, you see kind of, you start putting your pieces together. I think it'll be interesting to see in the exhibition games is when we're first going to kind of get an inclination as to how's the ball moving. Is the connectivity better on defense? And also kind of utilization, like where's the ball going where's the ball going to kind of initiate, not just initiate, but also when, how is the ball getting into the paint? Are we still are we more going to be as post reliant, or are we going to see more attacking off of drives? I would say that, from a standpoint of how you get these guys together, a lot of it is, you kind of just, a lot of it comes down to building that culture in the locker room. And this is where you rely on your senior leaderships. You have to really rely on guys like, again, Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal. But now you got to, now it's increasingly going to be Malik Renew. It's going to be interesting to see if he's the guy that steps up into a leadership role And you can kind of maybe tell, like, in the off season, if you start seeing him out and about a little bit, starting to do maybe some NIL events here and there or what have you. And is he bringing other guys with him? Like, if we start seeing, like if Renew brings a couple guys to an NIL thing he's doing, new guys right off the bat, that'll be an interesting sort of tell, I think, because it's showing that I'm taking these guys under my wing and I'm kind of helping them acclimate themselves to Indiana basketball and what it really means. But again, I think it's going to be probably for us looking at this, and I think for fans looking at this, it's going to be around that Halloween period. And as we first kind of, because we're going to get the reports, and I think the reports are always going to be positive because you're in a honeymoon phase. These kids are just getting together. They're all excited, and they're all going to play 30 minutes, and they're all going to score 20 points a game, and everyone's going to be really, really happy. And then you get into the grind of a season. And so and really the question is going to be, can they continue if we get into past Thanksgiving, after Atlantis, what do things look like? How do things feel? Are we seeing, improvement in December? Then I know that, at that point, I think we'll have a better idea of what this team is going to go. And we start talking about portal jumps, they had a really good portal haul. And I think it's 5 they got out of the portal.
Yeah, that sounds right.
5 out of the portal. So, I mean, that's, that now you're kind of almost after 5, you get the law of diminishing returns. We were kind of finding this past year in the portal that once you get to 6, 7, 8, really 4 or 5, but you can see teams jumping. And so can they make the jump from 19 wins to 25, I think is where that is. And I think a lot of those early indicators of how they're looking, how things are looking, if things are looking a little different, a little more open, a little more fresh, and defensively, especially if they're able to make, cover better. I mean, if we see the same problems we've seen the last beginnings of the season, then it may, they will get better, but it's just a matter of will be a smoother or bumpier road. Just so many questions. It's so hard with a new team. So hard.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Appreciate your thoughts on a probably impossible question to answer, but I know it's one that's on people's mind as we as we think about that. Literally, you kind of know what the roster is now. You move beyond that uncertainty, and now your uncertainty has changed to, okay, how does this all work? How does everybody stay happy? How does everybody work together? And all those kinds of things. And that's the part that it's easy to kind of watch and see, like, okay, I know this guy's on the roster now. The other stuff, you got, 6 months of waiting to figure out before you really see him play a game before you can really get a glimpse. And as you said, everybody had the best offseason of their life. They've never been in better shape. Everybody's getting along well. All that stuff sounds great. And it probably is true to a certain extent for every team as you get through the offseason. But at some point, the bolts start flying. You figure out how things are really going. And so we just got a while to wait for that part.
When I was a kid, Andy, every summer the Sears Wish Book would come out. And every summer I grabbed my marker. And every summer I was getting it all. And that's the thing, is that it sucks because Christmas is 6 months away. And now I'm all geared up. And I'm watching G.I. Joe and there's all these toys I know I'm going to play with. And that's where we are right now. And I think a lot of it is, for me, it's just exciting because, okay, we get to play with this a little bit. We kind of see, okay, like Tony mentioned in X's and Joe's, Mike asked him what sets, and he's like, I'm, looking at horns concepts. How can you kind of look at different stuff running it out of the horn, out of horn schemes. And I'm like, yeah, we can play with that I could do that for a month. Just messing around and looking at different video and seeing, oh man, they could do this with Rice and Carlisle, and like they can do with Mbako now, with just a little more penetration. So yeah, just have some fun with it.
All right. Well, before I wrap things up, we alluded to it a couple times, but X's and Joe's, give people a quick overview of what to expect from this week's episode. I know a lot of folks have really been enjoying it. I certainly would count myself among those. So thought this week's episode was a good one. But if you just want to give a quick plug to you guys and what you guys talked about this week.
Well, we brought Tony on and we talked a lot about Tony because we realized nobody really, just who is Tony Aranja? We never really knew. We wanted to get his whole backstory, and really, Mike and I were most interested in how he scored the whole. We go through how he got his marriage proposal at Assembly Hall on the floor. If you haven't seen that on YouTube, it should be in the show notes. But you can just you can find it on Tony's site or all over. Just look it up. It's amazing, and it's just. But got to know Tony a little better, and hopefully some folks got to know him a little better as well. But also just how his trajectory and the rise of analytics inside coaching have coincided. And we talked a lot about what it looks like today versus what it looked like even as short as 10 years ago, just in the amount of data, information, and how you apply it and how programs are applying it. And talked a little bit about, I use recruiting class, and talked a little bit about some of the coaching techniques that kind of go in with how you deal with the how you deal with all this new information that can be overwhelming, and especially even guys that try to stay up on it. There's always something new around the corner. So Tony did a great job kind of walking us through that a little bit more, and just talking about that. So
yeah, awesome. Well, definitely
give us a listen.
Yeah, definitely encourage people to check it out. I thought it was good. Definitely learned some things about Tony's backstory that I did not know. So that was good stuff. And I know you guys linked to the video. You're probably still on the search for Marquise Teague breaking Tony's ankles. So the search for that probably goes on. But the
Holy Grail is out there, and I think I've got the map. But I got to pull a couple strings and call in a few favors. Guy knows a guy. And by the way, if you skip to the end, like you get to the end, you'll understand the Fabian references. Trust us on this. It's pretty uncanny.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. All right, well, that will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, you can join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Thanks to Bob Thompson for producing our music. And thanks to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. And thank you for listening. Until then, we'll be back next Thursday.
Take it
Until
from
then,
me, Christian Wofford. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
I like everything about that.
Coverdale's like a real early James Harden.
all right, just had to throw that one in there just for fun.
You have to throw that in. Actually, I don't think he's up to it, but I would love to see Coverdale. I would have loved to have seen this 10 years ago with Tom Coverdale and Dane Fife and some of those guys doing the TBT.
Sure.
Get some of the guys from my era out there. Actually, what they should do is they should do like the TOBT, the old basketball. I mean, get these guys. You have to be like 45 or over to play. Get these guys out. Do it at a YMCA for all I care, and just let them go. Keep some paramedics on
funny.
site.
Some of the it's just you got to do that, and then you look at some of these dudes where it's like Calvert. You look at him, and it's like he could just still go out and play. You just look at him, and he's ready. So maybe that'll be. We can pitch that the TOBT. Yeah,
TOBT. We could do that at the Hyper in a few years. It is funny because I know in Columbus, a lot of the old Columbus high school guys and Columbus North and East guys from the 70s and 80s get together out at Saraland Park, and those games, it's almost like it's the best basketball maybe in the area code. I mean, these guys in their 50s and 60s, and they're just still beating the crap out of each other like they're 16. So
gotta love it.
Pretty impressive. You gotta love it.
Gotta love it. Yeah, in 49 other states, right?
Yeah, here it's a way of life.
Exactly. All right. Well, Bob, I appreciate you joining me and talking through Hatton. And like I said, enjoyed X's and Joe's. And maybe the next time we talk, the Reds will be playing a little bit better.
God willing. It's got to happen.
Yeah. Can't play much worse. So if we think of it that way.
They really can't. They really can't.
It would be tough. It would be tough. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll be back next Thursday. And some combination of us will talk to you then. And we will talk to everybody later. Thanks, Bob.
Have a great night.